Marcus Whitfield built an empire on information, data analytics, predictive algorithms, pattern recognition. His company processed billions of data points every second for Fortune 500 clients worldwide. He understood numbers, trends, probabilities. What he didn't understand was silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from an empty room. The kind that comes from children who should be laughing, screaming, running through hallways, making the chaos that drives parents wonderfully insane. The kind that settles into a house like death and never leaves. His penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Seattle. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of Elliott Bay, the Space Needle, the Olympic Mountains in the distance, 12,000 square feet of custom Italian marble, imported furniture, art pieces worth more than most people's homes, and 3 small boys who never made a sound. Oliver, Mason, and Daniel, 5 years old, identical triplets with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes that looked at the world without really seeing it. Autism spectrum disorder, severe, non-verbal. The diagnosis came when they were 2. Delivered by a specialist. Marcus paid $20,000 to fly in from Switzerland. The prognosis is unfortunately quite clear, Mr. Whitfield. With this level of severity, no language development, no eye contact, significant sensory sensitivities, verbal communication is highly unlikely. Many children like this remain non-verbal for life. I recommend full-time care, intensive ABA therapy, and managing your expectations accordingly. Marcus had nodded, shaken the man's hand, paid the invoice, and then locked himself in his office for 6 hours. His wife Rachel found him there at midnight, sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. "We'll get through this," she'd said, taking his hand. "We'll find the right therapists, the right schools, the right support. We'll figure it out together." They didn't figure it out together, because 8 months later, Rachel's car was hit by a drunk driver on I-5. She died at Harborview Medical Center before Marcus could get there. Her last words, according to the nurse, were about the boys. "Tell them Mama loves them. Tell them I'll always..." And then nothing. Marcus stood at her funeral, holding 3 small hands, listening to a pastor talk about God's plan and eternal peace, feeling absolutely nothing. The boys didn't cry, didn't react, didn't seem to understand that the woman who'd kissed them goodnight every evening, who'd sung to them even when they didn't sing back, who'd never stopped believing they'd break through someday, was gone forever. That was 18 months ago. Since then, the penthouse had become a fortress. Therapists came and went on strict schedules. Occupational therapy Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Speech therapy Tuesday, Thursday. ABA sessions every afternoon. Each session documented, measured, analyzed. Progress tracked in charts and graphs that showed, consistently, almost no progress at all. The boys lived in their own worlds. Oliver lined up Hot Wheels cars by color for hours, becoming violent if anyone disrupted his patterns. Mason rocked back and forth, hands flapping, making a low humming sound that never changed. Daniel stared at spinning objects, fans, wheels, anything that rotated, his face blank, unreachable. They didn't play together. Didn't play at all, really. They existed in parallel, 3 separate islands that never touched. And Marcus, who'd built a billion-dollar company on understanding patterns, couldn't find any pattern that would bring his sons back to him. CTA Hashon. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Section 2. The surveillance system. The cameras went in after the 4th caregiver. Marcus hadn't wanted to become that person, the paranoid employer watching his staff through hidden lenses, reviewing footage like some corporate security analyst. But necessity had a way of stripping away what you thought you'd never do. Caregiver number 1 quit after 3 weeks. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitfield, but I just can't watch them suffer like this. It's too heartbreaking," she'd cried when she said it, which made Marcus want to throw her out immediately. His sons weren't a tragedy to be pitied. They were children who needed care, not sympathy. Caregiver number 2 lasted 6 weeks before Marcus discovered she was sedating the boys during the day to make them easier to manage. Small doses of children's sleep medicine, nothing dangerous, she'd insisted when he confronted her. Just enough to keep them calm. He'd fired her on the spot and spent the next week terrified of what those medications might have done to their developing brains. Number 3 seemed perfect. Credentials from a prestigious program, 5 years experience with special needs children, glowing references. She lasted 4 months before Marcus came home early one day and found her screaming at Oliver for knocking over his carefully arranged cars. "You stupid little," she'd been saying when Marcus walked in. The rest of that sentence would haunt him forever, even though she never got to finish it. Number 4 was the worst. Sweet, patient, seemingly devoted. The boys actually seemed calmer with her, which Marcus took as a good sign. Then his accountant noticed irregularities. 5,000 here, 3,000 there, small enough to miss in his regular expenses but adding up over 6 weeks to nearly $30,000. She'd had access to his home office, his personal laptop, his financial passwords written in a notebook he'd stupidly left in his desk drawer. She'd stolen from him while caring for his most vulnerable children. That's when Marcus called the security company. "I want cameras in every room," he'd said. "I want cloud storage, motion detection, facial recognition. I want to be able to access the feed from anywhere, anytime, and I want it done tomorrow." The technician had hesitated. "Sir, we typically recommend more limited coverage for privacy reasons." "I don't care about privacy," Marcus interrupted. "I care about knowing what's happening to my children when I'm not there. Can you do it or not?" They did it. 16 cameras throughout the penthouse. Living room, playroom, bedrooms, kitchen, hallways. The only spaces without surveillance were the bathrooms and Marcus's private office. Everything else was visible, recorded, saved to encrypted servers that Marcus could access from his phone, his laptop, anywhere with internet. He reviewed the footage every night, hours of it, watching caregivers interact with his sons, looking for warning signs, red flags, anything that suggested the person he'd trusted was failing them, or worse, hurting them. Most of what he saw was mundane. Caregivers following protocols, administering therapies, preparing meals, cleaning up messes, doing their jobs competently if not particularly warmly. The boys remained unchanged. Oliver lining up cars, Mason rocking and humming, Daniel staring at the ceiling fan. Nothing improved, nothing got worse. Just an endless plateau of existence that made Marcus want to put his fist through the window some nights. Caregiver 5 quit, after 2 months. "I need to work somewhere I feel like I'm making a difference," she'd said. Translation: his sons were hopeless, and she didn't want to waste her time. 6 through 10 came and went. Various reasons. Better opportunities, family obligations, personal issues. Marcus suspected the truth was simpler. Caring for 3 severely autistic children who never responded, never improved, never gave any indication that the work mattered. It wore people down, broke them eventually. By the time he called the agency for the 11th time, Marcus's expectations had bottomed out entirely. He wasn't looking for someone exceptional, just someone who'd show up, follow the routines, not steal from him or hurt his children. The bar had gotten that low. "I have someone," the agency director said. "Her name is Sophia Reyes, 28, degree in special education, 4 years experience with non-verbal children. Her references are solid, and she specifically requested a position with children on the autism spectrum." "Why?" Marcus asked immediately. "Why would someone specifically request this?" "I believe she has personal experience with the disability. A younger brother, if I remember correctly." Marcus felt a flicker of something. Not hope, he'd buried hope 18 months ago next to Rachel, but maybe curiosity. Someone who understood this world from the inside might at least last longer than the others. "Send her over for an interview," he said. Sophia Reyes arrived on a Thursday afternoon in October. Marcus watched her on the camera feed as his assistant let her in petite, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, jeans and a clean sweater, carrying a worn canvas bag over her shoulder. She didn't look around at the expensive art or the designer furniture. Her eyes went immediately to the playroom entrance, where she could hear Oliver's cars clicking against the hardwood floor. Marcus came down from his office to meet her. She stood when he entered, extending her hand with a firm grip and direct eye contact. "Mr. Whitfield, thank you for meeting with me. Miss Reyes," he gestured to the chair, "please sit." They sat across from each other in his formal living room, a space so pristine it looked like it had never been used because it hadn't. This room was for show, for the rare business meetings held at his home, for the illusion that Marcus Whitfield had a life outside of his silent children and his relentless company. "The agency mentioned you have experience with non-verbal children," Marcus began, keeping his voice businesslike. "Clinical. Easier that way." "Yes, sir. My brother Mateo is 14 now. He didn't speak until he was 9. Marcus's eyes sharpened. 9 years old. Yes, sir. Everyone told my mother he never would, that she should accept it, institutionalize him, focus on her other children. Sophia's expression didn't change, but something fierce lived beneath her calm surface. She didn't listen, and he speaks now. Full sentences. Goes to a mainstream school with support. Reads at grade level. He'll probably never be completely typical, but he's present. He's connected. He's here. Marcus felt that dangerous flicker again. He stamped it down immediately. Miss Reyes, I appreciate your brother's story, but my sons are different. They've had the best therapists, the most current interventions. Their prognosis is what specialists told you based on statistics, Sophia interrupted gently. I understand, Mr. Whitfield, but statistics describe populations, not individual children. It was almost exactly what Angela had said in that video he'd watched once at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, searching for answers he knew didn't exist. He'd dismissed it then as inspiration porn nonsense. Now, hearing it directed at his own sons, it landed differently. What makes you think you can do something the professionals couldn't? He asked. Sophia met his eyes. Because professionals see diagnoses and treatment protocols, I see children who are trying to communicate in the only ways they know how, and maybe nobody's been listening the right way. Marcus should have ended the interview there, should have thanked her politely and showed her out. Instead, he stood up. Follow me. Marcus led Sophia down the hallway toward the playroom. With each step, the clicking sound of Oliver's cars grew louder, a rhythmic, obsessive pattern that had become the soundtrack of this house. Click, 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 pause, click, click, click. They stopped at the doorway. Marcus didn't enter, just stood there watching his sons exist in their separate worlds. Oliver sat cross-legged on the floor, 47 Hot Wheels cars arranged in a perfect line by color: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. He was starting a second row now, his small hands moving with mechanical precision. If anyone touched those cars, he would scream a sound so primal it made your bones hurt. Mason sat in the corner, rocking forward and back, hands flapping near his ears. His humming never changed pitch or rhythm, just one continuous note that he'd maintained for the last hour, according to the timestamp Marcus had seen on the morning footage. Daniel stood at the window, face pressed against the glass, watching the construction crane across the street rotate. He'd been standing there since breakfast, hadn't eaten much, hadn't used the bathroom, just stood watching that crane move in circles. Those are my sons, Marcus said flatly. Oliver, Mason, Daniel. They don't respond to their names, don't make eye contact, don't acknowledge when you enter or leave a room. The current caregiver is on her lunch break. She'll be back in 20 minutes to begin afternoon therapy protocols. Sophia stepped into the room slowly. She didn't go toward any of the boys, didn't try to interrupt their rituals. She just moved to a neutral space near the bookshelf and sat down on the floor, legs crossed, hands in her lap. Hello, she said softly, not to any specific child, just into the room. My name is Sophia. None of the boys reacted. Oliver kept arranging cars, Mason kept rocking, Daniel kept staring. Marcus waited for Sophia to do something, try to engage them, test their responses, demonstrate some technique. She didn't. She just sat there, quiet and present, like she had all the time in the world. 3 minutes passed. 4, 5. Mason's humming changed pitch, just slightly, just for a second, but it changed. Sophia's eyes moved to him, but she didn't say anything, didn't point it out or make it significant, just noted it and continued sitting. Marcus's jaw tightened. This woman was wasting his time. Miss Reyes, I need to see credentials, not meditation. Oliver, Sophia said suddenly, still not moving. Those are beautiful cars. I especially like the blue ones. Oliver's hands paused. For less than a second, but they paused. Marcus's breath caught. Sophia reached into her canvas bag and pulled out 3 small toy cars. Nothing fancy, just basic plastic vehicles. She set them on the floor in front of her, not in any particular pattern, and then folded her hands in her lap again. I brought these from home, she said conversationally, but they don't have anyone to play with. They're feeling a little lonely. Silence. The boys continued their routines. Then Oliver's head turned, just a fraction of an inch toward Sophia, toward the cars. You're hired, Marcus said abruptly. 75,000 annually. Start Monday. Follow the therapeutic protocols exactly. No deviations. And understand, his voice hardened, I have cameras in every room. I will be watching. Sophia looked up at him, no judgment in her eyes. I understand, Mr. Whitfield. Good. My assistant will handle the paperwork. Marcus left the room before he could see whether Oliver would reach for those cars, before he could let himself believe it meant anything. Sophia Reyes started on a Monday morning in late October. Marcus watched through his laptop from his downtown office as she entered the penthouse at precisely 7 a.m. She wore jeans, a simple grey sweater, her hair in that same practical ponytail. She carried the same canvas bag and a small backpack. The morning caregiver, Miranda, efficient but emotionally distant, reviewed the boys' night routine with Sophia, pointing to charts that documented meals, sleep patterns, behavioral incidents. Sophia listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. Then Miranda left, and Sophia was alone with 3 boys who wouldn't look at her. Marcus had cleared his morning schedule, told his assistant to hold all calls. He needed to watch this, needed to see whether his instinct about this woman was correct, or whether she'd be just another name on the list of failures. Sophia didn't immediately try to engage the boys. Instead, she walked through the space slowly, observing. She noticed Oliver's cars now arranged in 3 perfect rows, 62 vehicles Marcus had counted on yesterday's footage. She noticed Mason's rocking spot in the corner, the way the carpet was worn down from months of repetitive motion. She noticed Daniel's position at the window, fingers pressed against the glass. Then she did something unexpected. She started singing, not children's songs, not therapy jingles, just a soft melody in Spanish, something that sounded old, like a lullaby passed down through generations. Her voice was gentle, untrained but genuine, and she sang while she moved around the room, organizing toys, straightening books, simple tasks that didn't require the boys' attention. Duerme, duerme, negrito, que tu mamá está en el campo. Marcus turned up the volume on his laptop. He didn't speak Spanish, had no idea what the words meant, but there was something hypnotic about the melody, something that felt like safety. Mason's rocking slowed, just slightly, but Marcus saw it. The rhythm that never changed, that had been constant for 18 months, shifted tempo. Sophia moved to the bookshelf and pulled down a picture book. She sat on the floor, not near any of the boys, but visible to all of them, and opened it. This is a story about a little boy who loved trains, she said in English now, her accent soft around the edges. Every day he would watch the trains go by his house, red trains, blue trains, yellow trains. She turned the page slowly, showing the pictures to the empty room. Daniel's fingers stopped tapping on the window, his head tilted, just barely, toward the sound of her voice. Marcus leaned closer to his screen. His heart was pounding in a way that felt dangerous, like hoping was the stupidest thing he could do. Sophia continued reading, her voice steady and unhurried. When she finished the story, she closed the book and set it down. I think I'll read it again tomorrow, she said to no one, in case anyone wants to hear how it ends. She stood up and moved to the kitchen area, an open space that flowed into the main living area. She began preparing the boys' mid-morning snack, sliced apples, cheese cubes, crackers, the same things Miranda had prepared every day for 6 months. But Sophia did something different. She hummed while she worked. That same melody from before, and as she hummed, she started moving the cheese cubes into a pattern on the plate. A circle, then a square, then a line. Oliver's head turned, fully this time, his whole body shifting to watch what Sophia was doing. Marcus's hand covered his mouth. Sophia noticed but didn't react, just kept arranging food, kept humming, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I wonder, she said conversationally, which pattern would taste better, the circle or the line? She held up a piece of cheese from the circular arrangement and ate it herself. Circle tastes pretty good. Oliver stood up. His legs moved awkwardly. He spent so much time sitting that walking seemed foreign to his body. But he walked across the room, past the cars he never left, past the safe zone he'd maintained for 18 months. He walked to where Sophia stood. Marcus stopped breathing. Oliver reached out his hand, not toward Sophia, toward the plate. His small fingers hovered over the cheese cubes arranged in a line. He took one, brought it to his mouth, ate it. Then he looked up, not at Sophia's face, but at her shoulder. Close enough. Line, he whispered. The word was barely audible, rough from a voice that hadn't been used for speech in years. But it was a word. Clear, intentional, real. Marcus's eyes flooded. He pressed both hands against his desk to keep himself from shaking. Sophia smiled softly. Line. Good choice. She held out the plate. Oliver took another piece of cheese, returned to his cars, and sat back down. But something had shifted in the room. Something impossible had just happened. And Marcus watched it all from 7 miles away, wondering what the hell he was witnessing. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus became obsessed with the footage. He'd always reviewed it nightly, an hour or two before bed, checking for problems or concerns. Now he watched it constantly, during lunch breaks, between meetings, late into the night, until his eyes burned from screen glare. He watched Sophia with his sons, watched impossible things become routine. Week 1. Oliver spoke 6 more words. Car, red, more, yes, no, mama. That last one aimed at a photograph of Rachel that Sophia had found in a drawer and placed on the shelf. Marcus had hidden all the photos after the funeral. Couldn't bear to look at her face, at the future she'd never see. But Sophia had found one and given it back to Oliver, who'd stared at it for 12 minutes before whispering that single word. Week 2. Mason stopped rocking. Not completely, not all at once, but the constant back-and-forth motion that had defined his existence began to break apart. Sophia would sit beside him, never touching, just near and hum that Spanish lullaby. Gradually, Mason's hands would still. He'd look at her face for seconds at a time before returning to his safer patterns. But those seconds grew longer. 3 seconds became 5, became 10, became moments where Mason seemed almost present. Week 3. Daniel left the window. Marcus had watched this particular footage 7 times in a row, unable to believe what he was seeing. Sophia had been sitting on the floor, this time with a small toy train set she'd brought from home. Nothing elaborate, just a wooden track in an oval with a battery-powered engine. She'd set it up without announcing it, just started the train moving in circles while she hummed and sorted through picture books. Daniel had been at his usual post, watching the construction crane through the window. But the crane had stopped for the day, and without the movement, Daniel seemed lost. His hands tapped against the glass frantically, searching for the rotation that wasn't there. Sophia glanced over but didn't approach. Just let the train keep moving in its circle. Around and around, consistent and predictable. Daniel's tapping slowed. His head turned toward the sound of wheels on wooden tracks. The train goes round and round, Sophia sang softly. Round and round, round and round. Daniel walked away from the window. He crossed the entire room, something Marcus had never seen him do voluntarily. He sat down beside Sophia, folded his legs, and watched the train. For 43 minutes, Daniel sat there, mesmerized by circles he could control instead of a crane he couldn't. When Sophia finally turned off the train, Daniel looked at her, made eye contact. Real, direct, intentional eye contact for the first time in his life. Again, he said. One word. Clear as day. Sophia smiled. Okay, sweetheart. Again. She turned the train back on, and Daniel watched with complete focus. This child who doctors said would never connect, never communicate, never be more than a body in a room. Marcus closed his laptop and put his head in his hands. It happened on a Friday night. Marcus had been at a board meeting that ran late investor concerns about Q4 projections, strategic pivots for the Asian market, things that used to consume his entire focus, but now felt hollow compared to what was happening in his own home. He checked his phone obsessively during breaks, watched live feeds of the penthouse. Sophia was preparing dinner, chicken, rice, steamed vegetables, the same meal plan approved by the boys' nutritionist. Nothing unusual. The boys were in their typical evening routines. The meeting finally ended at 8:30. Marcus drove home through Seattle traffic, exhausted, his mind half on spreadsheets and half on footage he'd review later that night. He took the private elevator up to his penthouse, keycard accessing the top floors, and stepped into the foyer expecting the usual quiet. The careful, managed silence of a home where chaos was controlled. Instead, he heard laughter, real laughter, the kind that bubbles up from pure joy, unfiltered and wild. Marcus froze. His briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor with a crash that he barely registered. That sound, it couldn't be real. His sons didn't laugh, didn't make spontaneous sounds of happiness. The only noises they'd ever made were distress screaming when routines changed, humming to self-soothe, crying when the world became too much. But this was laughter. Marcus moved down the hallway like a man in a dream, each step uncertain, terrified that if he moved too fast the sound would disappear and he'd realize he'd imagined it. The laughter grew louder. Multiple voices now, children's voices, He reached the living room and looked inside. Sophia was in the center of the space, kneeling on the floor with her hands held out. Oliver, Mason, and Daniel were around her in a circle. They were actually playing some kind of game where Sophia would clap her hands and they'd jump, then fall down laughing before scrambling back up to do it again. "Ready?" Sophia called out, grinning. 1, 2, 3, jump! All three boys launched off the ground, their small bodies airborne for just a second, mouths open in squeals of pure delight. They landed, tumbled, giggled, and Oliver, who'd never willingly touched another person, threw his arms around Sophia's neck. "Again!" he shouted. Not whispered, shouted. "Again! Again!" Mason and Daniel were laughing so hard they were rolling on the floor, their faces lit with joy Marcus had never seen, had never imagined was possible. Marcus's legs gave out. He grabbed the doorframe to keep from collapsing, his vision blurring, chest cracking open like something inside him had been locked away for so long it had calcified, and now it was breaking apart with physical pain. His sons were alive, not just breathing, not just existing alive, laughing, playing, touching, connected to another human being in ways the specialists said they never would be. Sophia noticed him then. Her smile faltered when she saw his face, saw him barely holding himself up against the wall, tears streaming openly down his face. But she didn't stop, didn't rush to explain, just kept her attention on the boys. "One more time?" she asked them gently. "Yes!" all three shouted in unison, his sons speaking together, responding together, functioning as a unit instead of isolated islands. "Okay, 1, 2, 3, jump!" They jumped again, and Marcus slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, watching this miracle through blurred vision, his whole body shaking. Oliver noticed him then, stopped mid-laugh and pointed. "Daddy," he said. Not Papa the way he used to occasionally label Marcus in that flat, disconnected way, but Daddy, a word full of recognition and meaning. Mason and Daniel turned, saw their father on the floor, crying. Their faces showed concern, actual emotional recognition of another person's state. "Daddy sad?" Mason asked, his voice uncertain but present. Marcus couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He just shook his head, trying to signal that he wasn't sad. He was. He didn't even have words for what he was. Sophia stood up slowly. She walked over to Marcus and knelt beside him, close enough that he could see the understanding in her eyes. "They've been working very hard," she said softly. "They wanted to surprise you." "How?" Marcus's voice came out broken. "How did you?" the doctors said. "The doctors were wrong," Sophia interrupted gently. "Your sons were never unreachable, Mr. Whitfield. They were just speaking a language nobody had learned yet." Oliver walked over, that brave boy who'd spent 5 years trapped in patterns nobody could break. He stood in front of his father, studying his face. Then he did something that made Marcus's world tilt completely. Oliver reached out and touched Marcus's wet cheek, his small fingers gentle, curious, present. "Don't cry, Daddy," he whispered. Marcus pulled his son into his arms, this child he'd held countless times, but never felt truly hold him back, and Oliver didn't stiffen or pull away. He melted into the embrace, his small arms wrapping around Marcus's neck. Mason and Daniel approached shyly, like they weren't sure if they were invited. Marcus opened his arms wider, pulling all three boys close, holding his sons, really holding them for the first time in their lives. "I love you," he choked out. "I love you so much." "Love you too, Daddy," Oliver said against his shoulder. "Love, Daddy," Mason echoed. "Love," Daniel whispered, the word new and strange in his mouth, but he said it. Over the heads of his children, Marcus looked at Sophia. She was crying too now, quiet tears that she wiped away quickly. "Thank you," Marcus mouthed silently. Sophia nodded, gave him a small smile, and quietly stepped back, giving this family their moment, while she moved to the kitchen, putting distance between herself and something that was starting to feel too big, too important, too dangerous to her carefully guarded heart. The weeks that followed felt like living in a different universe. Marcus restructured everything, called his COO, and told him he was stepping back from daily operations. No more 12-hour days at the office, no more business trips to New York or San Francisco or Tokyo. He'd built the company to be self-sustaining. Time to let it actually sustain itself. "I'm working from home," he told his executive team. 4 days a week, I'm unavailable except for emergencies. Find someone else to handle the operational decisions." They'd stared at him like he'd announced he was selling the company. Marcus Whitfield didn't step back. Marcus Whitfield was the company. "My sons need me," he said simply. "Everything else is secondary." He meant it. Marcus started coming to breakfast, started being there when the boys woke up, instead of reviewing European market reports. He sat on the floor with them, learned their new games, watched Sophia work her quiet magic day after day. Oliver was speaking in full sentences now. Not always, not perfectly, but enough. "Daddy, look at my car. Can we have apples? I don't like that noise." Communicating needs, sharing thoughts, participating in his own life. Mason still rocked sometimes when overwhelmed, but he'd started seeking comfort in people instead of isolation. He'd climb into Sophia's lap when the world got too loud, let her hold him until the sensory overload passed, and increasingly, he'd seek out Marcus too. "Daddy, pick up," he'd ask, arms raised, and Marcus would scoop him up every single time, grateful beyond words for the privilege. Daniel had expanded his interests beyond rotating objects. He loved the train set Sophia brought, loved building block towers and knocking them down, loved a book about construction vehicles that Sophia read 17 times in one day because Daniel kept saying, "Again, again." The boys played together now, actually interacted, shared toys, fought sometimes like normal siblings, minor conflicts that made Marcus want to cry with gratitude, because fighting meant they were aware of each other as separate people with competing desires. Sophia taught them simple sign language to supplement their growing verbal skills. More, all done, help, tools to communicate when words felt too hard, and she taught Marcus the signs too, showing him how to meet his sons in whatever language they could use that day. "You're good at this," she told him one afternoon, watching him sign "snack time" to Daniel, who signed back, "Yes, please," a phrase Sophia had taught him just 2 days before. "I'm learning from an excellent teacher," Marcus said, and Sophia looked away quickly, but not before he saw her cheeks flush. He'd stopped thinking of her as an employee weeks ago, stopped watching the security footage to monitor her work, and started watching it because he couldn't stop thinking about her, the way she laughed with his sons, the way she sang those Spanish lullabies, the way she'd look at Marcus across the room with something warm and complicated in her dark eyes. He was falling for her, had probably been falling since that first day when she'd sat on the floor and Oliver had whispered, "Line," and the impossible had become possible. One evening, after the boys were asleep, Marcus found Sophia in the kitchen cleaning up from dinner. He'd let the housekeeper go months ago, another expense that had felt meaningless when his sons had been unreachable. Now Sophia did it herself, insisted she didn't mind. "Sophia," he said, and she turned, dish towel in her hands. "Mr. Whitfield." "Marcus," he corrected gently. "Please. You've lived in my home for 4 months. You've brought my sons back to life. I think we're past formalities." She smiled slightly. "Marcus," he moved closer, his heart pounding. "I need to say something, and I'm probably going to say it badly, but you've changed everything, not just for my sons, for me." Sophia's eyes widened. "Mr. Marcus, I'm just doing my job." "You're not," he interrupted. "You stopped being just the caregiver a long time ago. You're part of this family. The boys love you." He stopped, took a breath. "I love you." Sophia set down the dish towel, her hands trembling. "You can't say that." "Why not?" "Because I work for you. Because she gestured helplessly. "Because this can't be real." "It's the most real thing I've felt since Rachel died," Marcus said quietly. "Sophia, you brought light back into this house. You taught me how to be a father again. You made me believe in miracles when I'd stopped believing in anything." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Your sons need stability, structure. They're finally thriving. And if this goes wrong, then we'll make sure it doesn't go wrong," Marcus said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He took her hands in his. "I'm not asking you to be their caregiver anymore. I'm asking you to be their mother, and my partner, and the person I build a life with." "Marcus, I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But life's too short to waste time pretending we don't feel what we feel." Sophia looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. "I love them," she whispered. "I love your boys so much, it scares me." "And me?" She closed her eyes. "Yes, God help me, yes." Marcus pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, burying her face against his chest while he held her like she was the most precious thing in his world, because she was. From the baby monitor on the counter, Oliver's sleepy voice drifted through. "Sophia?" Daddy? They pulled apart, both smiling through tears. We're here, sweetheart, Sophia called softly. Go back to sleep. Love you, Oliver mumbled. Love you too, they said together. Marcus looked at Sophia, at this woman who'd walked into his life with a canvas bag and gentle songs and impossible faith. Stay, he said, not as an employee, as family. Yes, Sophia whispered. Yes. They married 6 months later in the penthouse, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Sophia's family came from California, her mother, who'd never given up on Mateo, her father, who'd worked 3 jobs to afford therapies insurance wouldn't cover, her brother Mateo himself, 14 years old and thriving, living proof that statistics don't determine destiny. Oliver, Mason, and Daniel were ring bearers, walking carefully down the makeshift aisle with velvet boxes in their hands, concentrating hard on their important job. Oliver only stopped once to straighten a car on the shelf that had been knocked slightly out of alignment. Some things would always be part of who he was, and that was okay. Marcus cried during his vows. You saved us, he said, voice breaking. Not because you tried to, but because you loved us when we didn't know how to love ourselves back. Sophia's vows were simpler. I choose you. I choose them. I choose this family. Every day. Forever. When they kissed, the boys cheered, actual cheering, shouting, celebrating. And Marcus thought about the specialist who'd said verbal communication was highly unlikely. He wished that man could see this, could understand that unlikely is not the same as impossible. That night, after the guests left and the boys finally fell asleep, Marcus and Sophia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the Seattle skyline. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't taken this job? Marcus asked, arm around her waist. Sophia leaned into him. Every day. But I think we were always going to find each other. Some things are meant to be. You believe that? I have to, she said softly, because the alternative that all of this was just random chance. That's too terrifying. I need to believe that God had a plan, that Rachel led me here somehow. Marcus kissed the top of her head, thought about his late wife, about the woman who'd loved these boys before they were born, who'd never gotten to see who they'd become. She'd love you, he said. Rachel would absolutely love you. I hope so, Sophia whispered. I hope she knows I'm taking care of them, that they're happy. From the nursery, the room that had been storage for abandoned equipment, but was now painted with clouds and stars, one of the boys called out, not in distress, just a sleepy, Mama? Sophia's breath caught. They'd started calling her that a month ago. She'd cried the first time, told Marcus she didn't want to replace Rachel's memory. You're not replacing anything, Marcus had said. You're adding to it. The boys can love you both. Now she squeezed Marcus's hand. I'll check on them. I'll come with you. They walked to the nursery together and found all 3 boys awake, sitting up in their beds, no longer the cribs from when they were babies, but actual twin beds with race car sheets they'd picked out themselves. Can't sleep, Mason said. Too excited, Oliver added. Mama got married, Daniel explained seriously, like this was breaking news. Sophia sat on the edge of Oliver's bed. Marcus sat on Mason's. They were a unit now, a team, partners in every sense. You're supposed to be dreaming, Sophia said gently. We were, Oliver said. I dreamed about cars. I dreamed about trains, Daniel said. I dreamed about singing, Mason added. Like Mama sings. Sophia started humming that Spanish lullaby she'd sung on her first day, the one that had started everything. Duerme, duerme, negrito. One by one, the boys settled back down, eyes growing heavy. Marcus watched his wife sing their children to sleep, watched the miracle of it, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete peace. Not the absence of struggle. Oliver would always need more support than typical children. Mason still had hard days when the world was too loud. Daniel still got obsessed with spinning objects sometimes. But they were here, present, connected, living. And Marcus was living too. Not just surviving, not just moving through days while grief hollowed him out from the inside. Actually living, loving, building a future that looked nothing like what he'd planned but was more beautiful than anything he could have imagined. Thank you, he whispered to Sophia after the boys fell asleep. For what? For teaching me that impossible just means nobody's tried the right way yet. Sophia smiled, took his hand, and led him out of the nursery. Behind them, 3 boys slept peacefully, their breathing synchronized, their small bodies relaxed. In their dreams, They ran and played and talked and laughed, things doctors said they'd never do. But doctors don't know everything. Sometimes miracles come in ordinary packages. Sometimes the person who changes your life shows up with a canvas bag and gentle songs. Sometimes love heals what medicine couldn't touch. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, impossible becomes irrelevant because you're too busy living the life you never thought you'd have. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that healing is possible and love still wins, share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to this channel because we tell stories for the hurting and the hopeful stories that remind us we're never alone. Comment below and tell us what moment touched you most. Your story matters, and maybe sharing it will help someone else believe in their own miracle. God's timing is never early, never late, always perfect.